Facet aims for changing more than a skyline. Facet is designed as an urban catalyst in which public and private life finds no boundaries. In Facet, the value of free space is equally important as the value of leasable space. It is in the balance of both where one can sustain positive urban life. I believe that it's through the effective use of free space where we can bring meaningful changes to urban environments. This is our responsibility as architects. The building concept is defined by three principles. I wanted the building to be one form, which really takes off from the ground and then is really sculpted to the top. There's more mass where you need more mass. The building is efficient where along the shaft and then it becomes narrower at the top. The second idea is the creation of a place versus just a space. And I think the program in the podium is giving us tremendous opportunities for that. The diversity of the program is great. The elevated park, the community center, and the bus station combined, I think they're creating a very unique podium. And finally, the ability of the building to tell you the story of how it works. I think as we look into the orientation, the positioning of the building, the views, the functions, we wanted a facade that really expresses all these things. You know, a facade that is rich, that is expressive, that is really honest, and that really tell us, here I am not just an office building. You know, I am an experience. We've done a lot of buildings in China, and context is always very important when we're thinking about this. In this particular case, for us, context was very interesting because there's a lot of significant buildings happening around us. There's very tall buildings, there's buildings already built, there's buildings with boldness, actually, not only scale, but with a certain attitude. And obviously, in our case, it's not about tallness, it's about creating a place. And for us, this was actually more important. Something that is fascinating about this particular problem is that the uses are very diverse. We have a bus station, we have a community center, we have, in these tall buildings, retail is always important, but we have a lot of retail. And obviously, the tower is mostly offices. So I think these podium uses were giving us an opportunity to do something extraordinary. And tying it with this idea of creating a place, I think the podium is becoming a very animated place. We think that actually the podium is going to give us a 24-hour life in this building, is going to blur the boundaries of private and public space, which for us is actually a very important thing. We want the building to be very open and very democratic. Landscape is always a very important element. The sides of tall buildings are very, very tight. You know, in general, there's not enough space to deal with all the traffic, all the drop-off, all the pedestrian flows, and then do a significant landscape concept. But I think in this building, as the podium is raised and we're freeing up area in the ground, there were great opportunities for the landscape. So we're creating a concept that it was based in the idea of going to the forest and looking up at these trees and seeing this incredible feeling of being surrounded by trunks and leaves very, very high up. And we sort of translated that idea into the plan of the building. So what became remarkable is that all the roads were sort of focusing on the core of the building. So all the roads lead to Rome, all the roads lead to the heart of the tower. When planning a tall building, there's so many parts. There was a very interesting sort of result that we got out of following the guidelines of the program, which had to do with where to put the building, where to put the tower in relationship to everything else. And somehow there were so many natural restrictions. There's the subway line, there is the main avenues, there's obviously orientation, what is important. There's this other tall building. So somehow, by default, the tower ended up in the northeast corner. That was great because it gave us a point of departure to start organizing the rest of the program. We had the community center in the most public space, which I think was great. And that asymmetry was making this very dynamic somehow. The urban relationships very dynamic as we were approaching the building. And of course, the bus station, which is a significant component of the building, had to be somewhere. The natural place was to locate it facing the main avenue because access is easy, and exiting through some of these secondary roads. Because of the bus station being so significant and such an important piece of the composition, we felt that it was important to get the attention higher, above the sort of the plane of the bus station. So the strategy was to create an elevated park. And we thought that this could be an incredible amenity for, not only for the building users, but for the public in general. In general, these towers, they lack this accessibility to public space. They become fortresses, you know, places that are impenetrable. And we wanted to create something that is very open and inviting, and that gives us an opportunity to explore this building even where we're not actually part of the daily life of that building. You know, we're just, for a brief moment, we become part of that story. And I think the story on this building in that podium level is an important story, because it's a story about connecting us again with nature, with ourselves, with our context. Is bringing us back to reflect on what we do. I think we're living life too fast, and as we create spaces like this, I think this is part of the responsibility of the architect, to give the general public places where they can actually reconnect with themselves and then go back and be productive. Planning in this building is not only about the planning module, which is 1.50 meters, and the column grid, which is 10.50 meters, and the lease span, which is 12 meters. We have a very efficient building. It's a central core. The elevator concept is quite efficient. We have 4 zones, 2 shuttle elevators, and then we have a transfer to the VIPs. It's a very efficient building in that sense, but for us, planning was more about how we can connect the building to the people and to the context. When one designs a tall building, there's always this idea of efficiency, at least for me. It's very important. A tall building needs to be efficient in the way that is planned, in the way that is positioned, in the way that you access, in the way that you move through it, vertically, horizontally. It has to be efficient in the way it uses resources like water, materials, right? But obviously, with such a critical mass, a building of this scale, the structure of the building is one of the most important components. In the case of this particular building, we decided to go for a diagrid. A diagrid in a building of this height is probably one of the most efficient structures, because it gives the building a lot of stiffness, you know, increases the lever arm of the building, gives a lot of stiffness in the perimeter. And then the core, you have a lot more flexibility in the design of the core. In difference to other buildings that use diagrids, we decided not to express the diagrid, not to make it really the most important element of the facade, but really to express it in a subtle way. And we were more interested in the planes to take on a lead role, in the planes of this building. So each plane, because of the different orientations, starts telling you a story, and in a very subtle way, they reveal what's behind them, which is this incredibly simple diagonal structure. The building envelope on a tower is probably one of the most important elements. There's a lot of area, and it does a lot of things. In this particular case, we wanted an envelope that really tells you the story of how the building works. I think the best analogy that I can give is that the envelope really responds to climate and to orientation, almost like the skin of an animal, that where when an animal needs more hair, the hair is longer and thicker. When he doesn't, it's actually thinner and shorter. In the north facade, the building is much more transparent, it's very open. As you approach the building from the north, you really read the functions, you see the people working. If you would approach from the south, the building is much different. The building is cladded with a layer of exterior sunshades that go in different directions. Some of them, they follow the diagonals of the structure. Some of them, they follow the vertical mullions. And what makes this very dynamic is that all of them, they follow this faceted facade. And that's why we call the building the facet, because it's really all these planes that are interconnected and they're facing different angles. And of course, this is going to add tremendous richness to the way the building reads during the day, because of these angles. They're going to create certain reflections. They're going to reflect the city, the street, the sky. So It's almost like a kaleidoscope in the facade of the building, yeah. And at night, it's going to be much more subtle. They're going to disappear, and you're going to start reading more the life of the building inside. In a building like this, energy is a very important aspect of the design. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about sustainability, and I think it's important when you have such a critical mass and big area and a lot of people, in one place. You're conscious about the way you're using water, the way you're introducing daylight into the building, which we're doing here. It's a very important aspect. The way you're reflecting your solar heat gains. In this particular case, in our building, for example, with the use of those sunshades, those exterior sunshades, we're actually reducing between 20 and 30% the cooling loads, which is a significant parameter. But there's another component which is rarely mentioned, but we actually think that is very important, and is wellness and health. I think biophilic design is something that is rarely applied to buildings of this scale, and that is why the podium in this particular building is essential, because we want to bring a connection to the environment, to nature, and again, as I said in the concept, in the initial concept of the building, to make this a place and not just a space. In building the city, tallness has become the ultimate choice in developing density. Tallness has become an instrument to advance technological progress and innovation. But in order to really create a sense of place, I think it's really important that tallness must be connected to the dynamics of context and culture. More and more often, skylines are responsible for branding a city, but this really doesn't create a place. Facet is designed with a holistic attitude in mind, in which all the elements of architecture and engineering and environment, functional, technological, are responding to each other, not to create a timeless landmark or a timeless building, but to create a timeless experience.